Good evening, everybody. My name is Freddie Gipp. I'm the CEO of Lead Horse LLC, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Red Talks podcast series featuring Larissa No Braid. Uh, Before we get into the conversation and everything, Larissa, can you take this time to kind of introduce yourself, where you come from, your background, what tribe you are, and we'll get into everything else after that.
Hello, my name is Larissa No Braid. I am an enrolled member of the three affiliated tribes in Fort Berthold, North Dakota, the Arikara, Mandan, and Hidatsa, and I am also a Oglala Lakota from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and I currently reside in Denver, Colorado. I was born and raised here, but I went to school or for college at Haskell Indian Nations University. I got my associates in liberal arts there and my bachelor's in business administration and management, as well as the record information management certifications. And that was back in 2017. And since then, I've been in Denver. And as of 2020, I'm the powwow coordinator for Denver March Powwow. And I also have my own business of No Braid Creations, which is beaded jewelry and beaded items and things like that.
Yeah, so kind of take me back to that decision to come to Haskell. What were the driving factors to get you here to Lawrence? And how did that play out? And kind of talk about what classes that you were taking, what was the most helpful, and some advice maybe for students or people who are aspiring to go to college, to kind of give some feedback and experience for what Haskell was like.
Well, the main reason I grew up in Denver, so I was usually the only Native American in every class. And if there were Native Americans, it was almost like they were ashamed. Like they didn't want to be known as Native. They wanted to be known as Hispanic or whatever else. So it was kind of
Yeah.
lonely growing up because, you have no one to talk to about powwows or ceremony. So I was kind of an outcast, I would say, especially in high school. So that was kind of the biggest factor was I wanted to go to school with other Native kids, and I had a lot of fun. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I made a lot of friends, from the Oklahoma area, kind of all over the U.S., not just powwow people, but just other natives. But that was the biggest reason. And then when I got there, I took, the courses that you need to get your associates. And then when I went into business, I think the class that helped me the most was the how to start your own business, and it was through KU, and it was just like basically how to start your own business from the portfolio to the to like just basically how you would run your own business and
The
what
the
steps you
like
needed to.
the like planning process, like business
Yeah.
plan and everything, and
Yes, that
oh, that's pretty awesome. So that must have been through the bridge program, is that
I think
right?
so.
Because I know when my sophomore year, I took a class when I was at KU. I took a American Indian history
Mhm.
with Dr. Eric Anderson, and that was a great class. Because I remember one instance I took that same class, or not really. It was the next year. It was another like elective at KU, and it was taught by a bunch of non-natives, and so it was kind of interesting because
Oh, mhm.
they mispronounced how to say Kiowa tribe, and so it was like kind of cringy as well. So,
Oh, geez.
but that was interesting though because when I went to KU, and going to LHS, being from Lawrence, Kansas, and even in middle school, while there was a lot of natives, there wasn't enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Meaning that like there was classes that I was in where it'd be maybe one native, two natives, and that was the regular here in Lawrence, which is pretty interesting because that's not what it's like in any other predominantly uh, white town. And
Mhm.
so, kind of high school, that's the same thing, and then going to KU, definitely. I mean, there was only like 130-ish Native Americans out of a uh, what do you call it? Whole entire student body population of at least 24,000.
Mhm.
And so we were a micro minority, and so it was kind of crazy. Uh, but you feeling the opposite effect, being around all those natives, and then taking all these classes, and you start your own business now too. And so, can you kind of explain the other edition that you took at KU or Haskell, which was the records management class?
Mhm.
That whole process, because Haskell also offers certifications for numerous things, right?
Mhm.
So can you kind of explain, what that program was like?
Well, first of all, it was really hard to get into. The only way I got into it was I had to take summer school. And I think that class had 5 openings, so I signed up right away because I heard such great things about it, and it really does help with your resume and things like that. But for me personally, it really helped with like tabulating. So putting things in order, like from names, categories, things like that. And it does help in the long run when you're trying to like look for something quick. And it just kind of helps with everyday things too. And as well as like taking care of your business, like making sure receipts are in order, addresses and things like that. But basically you just learn how to professionally alphabetize files, and there's a whole system to it. And you also get to take trips to the archives in Kansas City, and that was pretty interesting because they have a lot of different archives and historical things in there. And if you wanted to, you could use your certifications to go into that field. And I also took a one class. I'm not sure if they offer it anymore, but it was called everything's just like escaping my mind.
Yeah.
But it was basically about like restoring old documents and how to properly store them so like they don't, get water damage or
Yeah.
crack over time and things like that. So it was very interesting, and I like to think that I use a lot of that I learned from those classes since then. So
Nice. So fast forward, you graduated, um, and you now run your own business, No Braid Creations,
mhm,
and you also during college and stuff, you would travel with uh, your Denver March tabulators, going to powwows. And so, can you kind of explain that, what it was like traveling and doing the tabulation process, um, and how that kind of helped you with your records management experience? You know what I mean? Like, kind of like formulate
mhm,
everything, because I
yeah,
think that's a unique perspective. Because man, without tabulators, we'd have a messy event.
mhm,
And I remember I did some tabulation myself, and it's just such an intricate process. You know what I mean? It's such a delicate
mhm,
process, and it's such it needs to be a secure process. With formations, from even from this past decade with iCreation and CNT tabulations, it really shows you the unique aspect of this particular market. You know what I mean? That the
mhm.
unsung market. You know what I mean? That we really take for granted too. And so, can you kind of talk about how it was traveling with them, learning that process, and how that's kind of got you to the point to where you're at right now,
Mhm.
before leading the Denver March Powwow?
I would say I started helping when I was maybe in 7th grade. I was thinking about it today because at one point I was trying to fundraise candy bars, and in
Hmm.
order to do that, they said you have to help out with registering people and like help with tabulating. So I was like, okay, and I ended up going to that field trip. It was called Sea Camp out in San Diego. But that first powwow was called Council Tree Powwow in Delta, Colorado. It was beautiful, beautiful arena, very nice people. Hospitality was amazing. But their city and council decided to cancel that powwow. But it was at least, I would say, 200 dancers. It was a small powwow. And I helped there for a few years. And then I remember when I was 16, I helped out at Rocky Boy Powwow, and that was crazy.
Yeah.
There are so many categories. And then on Sunday night, we finished with the winners, like the dancing winners, and here there was drum money and there was nobody else there. It was just us, the tabulators. So we were there until about 6 a.m., I think, that time, handing out drum money, and it was chaotic. But just like growing up doing different powwows, it's kind of shown you like how we need to like keep things fair, and it has like you can't be cheating. You got to try your hardest to, make sure it's correct. And I guess, I don't know, it's just a job in itself. Like some people think it's just like 1 + 1 = 2. They got 2 points, and it's way more than that. There's the grand entry points, contest points, exhibition points, if there's a tie. And I hate to say this, but people like to cheat. So you got to keep out for those people.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, but I like to think I learned a lot from it, and I like to think that my customer service abilities are really good from it, from registering people over the years. And I've made friends too as well. So,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very interesting because, if you think about what the probability of something arising, like a legit circuit, the main thing that really legitimizes said circuit is the judging, because
mhm,
those are the people who determine who wins. Just like the NBA official, the NFL official, the referee.
mhm,
It's very interesting. And so, our model is very similar towards rodeos.
Yeah.
in the circuit, and with the PBR and stuff, how they only have what, like one, is it, I don't know, that is it like couple main judges maybe the all weekend,
I think
just
so.
the same people. And so like
Yeah.
it's just like, man, like then what does that look like then in the future? Do we have a course and curriculum where you tell people, but then that gets the whole situation of like taboo of like telling people what to look for, you know what I mean? And so that's just where
Mhm.
it's an interesting circumstance that we have. That's one of the final frontiers for powwow still. I mean, we'll probably go into 2040 and still have this question that will rise. But uh, focusing on you graduating and moving on and getting that experience, and having more of a responsibility within the Denver March tabulators, looking at everybody tabulating, mastering the keys. um, what is that, how is that, have, like, I guess would be more interesting, like coming into this year, because you had to make such a tough decision. I mean, nobody knew what was going to happen in January, you know what I mean, in February.
Mhm.
And in that particular circumstance, like that's risk management. And that's thinking about, okay, well, there's this thing happening. We don't know the severity of it, but what is it going to mean, if it's such a like you can contract it, from people from anywhere, from anything, just because there was a lot of unknown reasons, and people,
Mhm.
with that fear of the unknown, we started getting to the situation of being apprehensive, wanting to do things. And so, can you kind of explain, how much of a event planner and leader, you know, owner of your own business, how has this increased your critical thinking, moving forward from now? Because you made a tough decision, and a lot of people were, there was people, that weren't going to be happy, people that were
Mhm.
fortunate. I mean, you got mixed responses altogether. But you guys, since you guys are the powwow that starts the circuit. You know what I mean? The summer, the powwow season. It's always Denver March, then everything else. That's when it's the official, because everybody's
Mhm.
coming back. Everybody's trying to get back into powwow shape, and what better place to do it than a mile up? and
Mhm. Yeah.
so and so, can you kind of explain that? And especially it being your first year. I mean, that must have been really just tough in general. I was super excited for you and your success, but things happen for a reason. And so, can you
Yeah.
kind of explain that and what it was like, especially on that magnitude of the Denver March Powwow?
Mhm. Um, it was really hard. I would say, like, going in, we were, like, really excited. We were ready, and I also had people ready to live stream the powwow, which we haven't done in about 5 years or so. So, I believe my last meeting at the Coliseum was on March 7th, and that's when a lot of people were on edge, and they were getting ready for a volleyball tournament, I think, for high schoolers. And I was talking to the different Coliseum people, and they were just saying, just keep looking at the news, keep watching it, see what our mayor's saying, see what the who is saying. So we did, and then as the days grew on, it was just getting more and more like we don't know, like we're not sure what we're gonna do. And then I was also watching what happened with Apache Gold Powwow because that was 2 weekends before ours.
Yeah,
And there was a scare, I believe, that someone may have had a case down there, and
I
that's when
remember
it
that.
really, yeah, that's when it really hit me was like, what if somebody dies after they came to Denver March? What if somebody came here, got sick, took it home, and people die? Like, that's what it really came down to. And not only that, but like most of our committee members are 65 and over. So they were
Yeah,
at the main ones at risk. And it took me a while, but it was like, you guys got to think about yourselves and your family as well. I know there's people that need this power to go on, like the vendors, they need to go, but it was for the safety of everybody. Like it just wasn't safe. And then not only that, it wasn't safe. On March 11th, when the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, that's when we decided to call off the event. And then 2 days later, on March 13th, Mayor Hancock closed all Denver venues. So we wouldn't have been able to go anyway. So, like you said, things happen for a reason. And I just think it was for the best. And there were people voicing their opinions and um, they were just like worried, like what if somebody goes to the powwow, comes back, and the whole reservation is sick. And that's a true fear. And we do have small communities that people come from to come to Denver March, and there was just so many factors, but in the end we couldn't go on with it. And it was like a week before that we had to cancel, and it sucks, but we had to do it. And as soon as we decided that we were going to cancel, we called all of the vendors before, you know, they started coming to Denver, and we missed one vendor. They came all the way from Canada to Denver and then headed back home.
Dang.
Yeah, I felt really bad, but we missed them by like an hour. They found the voice message on their machine. But it was really hard. A lot of the vendors, they were okay with it. They were older and they were kind of scared. They didn't want to go and risk it. But there are also some vendors that were very upset, which is understandable. That's their main income. But it was just for the safety of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Um, and I guess it's kind of hard just to kind of just think ahead because, you know, while we talk and we look forward to 2021,
Mm-hmm.
we got powwows like at Black Hills canceling already in October. And that's really putting a strain on a lot of, you know, a lot of people's perceptions on, well, what is this gonna look like from here on out? And that really puts a more interesting situation on, you know, what is Durant going to do? What are these other powwows later in the year when it's winter time, when it's colder, when
Mm-hmm.
people are already sick as it is, you know, with the flu? What is this going to look like? And that's a tough situation. And so, while you are looking forward to 2021, as are we, um, you brought a good point about thinking ahead and saying, well, what if someone was to contract it and then go back to the res, or suddenly pass away from it?
Mm-hmm.
But then if that happened, you know, we already see, you know, with the Trump rallies and everything that, you know, they're making people sign liability waivers saying that, you know, if you contract this virus, we're not liable for said instance of what happens to you. And it's kind of an interesting situation. And I think that's where a lot of it's a gray area, which shouldn't be, which is just the liability of powwows. Like
Mm-hmm.
how, what is it going to take for us to realize that, you know, if hockey events or just any event in general has a particular set of insurance, where does that go for us, you know, and for those individual planners, you know what I mean, for those tribes that, you know, they welcome everybody but you can just show up, dance, and then that's it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you brought a good point about what if they died, then who's liable for that, you know? Like who, if this were to go to legal grounds, like what happens at this instance, you know? They'll look at the
Mm-hmm.
situation, they'll be like, well, you know, if Denver March never specified, or Young Professionals Power, or so and so, or Gathering Nations, who know, you name it, never specified, you know, that an agreement that, you know what I mean, they're not liable, then they're liable. Then what does that look like for the insurance aspect? And so, can you kind of talk about that, and your perspective on what you think? Will we have to start? You know, will there be insurance? I mean, I wish there should be because it's an event,
Mm-hmm.
and but what do you think about that from your perspective about the liability? And, you know, just for having, specifically, you guys have a large scale event and like Gathering Nations and other ones, but what do you think about that? Especially now seeing all the craziness with the looting and the riots, and, you know, sometimes the mass shootings too. Like, what is that from your perspective? You know, like what is this going to look like for the future, and how is this going to set the course on how we do things? You know, will security be the biggest bump, you know, in budgets? You know, will prize money go down because security measures went up? You know what I mean? So what do you
Mm-hmm.
think?
Well, I actually was thinking about this because last year, I believe it was Saturday afternoon, I was waiting for Grand Entry to start, and it was like all the royalty were right next to me. And I was writing something down, and I looked up, and this man got in between the royalty and the color guard, and he was pulling out something out of his backpack. And, you know, the world that we live in, it's like we don't know what he was going to pull out. He could have pulled out a gun and just started shooting. So, like, as soon as I saw that, I saw Tyler Yellowboy, I think our arena director, and a few other security guards, and they just went into motion. They were backing up the princesses. They were getting everybody away from him. But thank God he only had a flag. But it was like, what if? Like, what if he had something else? What if he had mace and just maced all those girls, the royalty? Like,
Yeah.
it was a scary situation, but, you know, thank God it wasn't anything serious. But it kind of made you wonder, like, what do we need to do? And that did come up before. We had a meeting with the Coliseum in February, and I brought that up, and as well as the woman, basically taking that man's bustle and dancing with it, because that's a no-no. Like, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, that was crazy when that happened.
Yeah, that
That
I
was
was doing
insane.
envelopes. Like, that was too much. But it's like little incidences like that, we need to bump up security so everybody can be safe. Like, nobody wants to go to a big event and be scared or like wonder like, what's something going to happen? And it's scary, but we have to think about it, especially in our world that we live in nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, for the instance of what happened in Charleston with the shooting at the church,
Hmm.
there was a report, I think it was a couple years ago, and it was in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was like a gaming esports tournament, like a Madden tournament, and the guy that lost the championship, I think he left the venue, came back, brought a gun, and shot the dude that beat him, and then like started proceeding to shoot other people. I don't know what happened, but that was a true instance that happened. And then the families were suing the esports league or the company, the tournament that was hosting it, the company that was producing the event, for like security negligence and
Hmm.
liability. And I think it's going to go in their favor, obviously, because I mean, what was the protocols for that?
Yeah.
But that's kind of a grim thing to talk about, especially in this
I
podcast.
know.
But like that's the reality of it. If we're serious enough, and which we are, we then
Mhm.
look at all aspects, the positives and the negatives of powwow planning. We're not trying to tell people what to do or how to
Mhm.
do it. We're just trying to say, hey, like, are you paying attention to this? Or hey,
Yeah.
is this an instance, where it needs to be focused on? Because I can't help to think, but there was a powwow that happened last year. I think it was called the Ebb and Flow First Nations, in
Mhm.
Canada. It can correct me on that, but there was a massive lightning storm that kind of rolled in all of a
Oh.
sudden, and 11 people got electrocuted.
That was scary.
And it's like, okay, if that happened, like what if that was you and your family? You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
what are you doing at that point moving forward? I mean, you're not gonna say, like, was there on the lightning liability waiver? No, there wasn't. Like, there's just like,
Yeah.
it's that instance of like, well, what happened? I read that and I didn't see anything what else happened after, but like, what do you do as a powwow committee? You know what I mean? Like, what could have been prevented? And
Mhm.
it's not us trying to tell people what to do, based off of whatever, if the powwow
Yeah.
has been outside for traditionally for 50 years, like, there's circumstances that you can avoid. But I mean, like, I don't know, it's pretty interesting, don't you think? Because then, I mean, I went to a powwow in South Dakota last year, and it was raining, and it kept raining and raining and raining, but they were still having people dance. And I think they had like the golden age of women dancing too when it was raining. And I was just like, man, like, and it was really part pouring when they had like a Teen Boys Fancy Dancer, and he was like the only one out there. And that poor
Mhm.
that poor kid, his bustle just looked like a wet feather duster. You know what I mean? Like, he was
Mhm.
just looking like a wet chicken. It was just kind of crazy. But I mean, like, what do you? What is the? What do we do? You know what I mean? Like, how? Like, what kind of decision making is kind of going in, or the situation, the awareness of it? Like, what do we need? Like, what do you think needs to happen? Do we need to start developing, these plans, or what? Because this is an intricate process, and powwows, I mean, people can do them however they wish. I mean, we
Mhm.
all do a siloed approach. And from your perspective, like, with COVID coming in to the mix now as well, like, what is this going to look like, for the future of Denver March, for the future of others? What's going to be your main focus moving forward to 2021?
I think right now it's going to be safety, and we've even talked about it as a committee. We have a phone call every 2 weeks, like a meeting phone call, and we just basically we're more concerned about the safety of the public and ourselves. And as long as it's safe, maybe next March we can go ahead and go forward. But as of right now, it's so uncertain. Like, it's almost like every hour there's a change.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's really hard to say, but at the same time, you have to kind of maybe kind of get a plan going. Like, what if we can have it, but only so many people are allowed in? How are we going to do that? It's just
Yeah.
that those are things that we have to start thinking of. And for the outdoor powwows, as a Northern buckskin dancer myself, like, I don't want my buckskin to get wet or my fringe. And it's like, a lot of these powwows should at least have a backup plan. Like if it is gonna rain, like you have to really watch the weather. Like San Manuel, for example. All those jamming drum groups, and we couldn't even dance Saturday, and it sucked. Like I
Just
was so
because it was
upset.
just really difficult. Like it rained. Like what was the situation? What happened? Like so it rained or what?
Friday night it was okay, but it was really cold. It was December, and it was in a baseball field. But then Saturday, everybody was getting ready for the afternoon grand entry, and it started kind of drizzling, and that's when I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And I think they tried to do the kids right away. I'm not sure if they did or not. And then it just started downpouring right before the evening grand entry, so they called it for the night. And the next day, the ground was kind of wet, but it wasn't as bad. But still, it was like, you have all those drum groups and can't even dance.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, that's the chance that people take with outdoor powwows. We can't
Yeah.
control the weather, you know what I mean? And that's the
Mhm.
risk associated with it. You know, for us, we made a decision to be like, hey, we're only going to stick with indoor powwows. Because I mean,
It's a
whether
little
it's
bit control.
during the weekday, the weekend,
Mhm.
the winter, the fall, the spring, the summer, it doesn't matter. You're inside,
Yeah.
and there's always that given circumstance. Now, with COVID in the mix, that's going to definitely change things. And I guess we'll have to just wait and see. You know, we're
Mhm.
going to have to wait and see. You know, what are these professional leagues doing? You know, if I understand that UFC's still going and having fights, and people are boxing. I think that's interesting. I know there's extensive testing happening. You know, screenings and preventative measures.
Mhm.
But that's just going to be a very interesting situation. You know, we can wear our masks, we can socially, we can be socially distant with our
Mhm.
6 feet or whatever, and we can, you know, be in our cars, we can do whatever, travel with with each other. But it's also going to put an interesting aspect. Well, will there be grand entries? You know what I mean? Will grand entries be, since we're all breathing hard and dancing? You know, like it's just like,
Yeah.
are we all going to be there? Like, you know, just breathing in all the grandmas and grandpas, like, you know, like just from just sweating. You know, it's just crazy because especially with Gathering of Nations, like
Yeah.
like the biggest thing that they tout is that photo of all the dancers so cramped in together that they can't move because of the, I mean, it's small, and
Mhm.
that's not, is that going to be a thing? You know what I mean? Like, are we just going to just, I don't know. It's very
Yeah.
interesting. You know, like there's a lot of questions in play that allows us to, you know, to define it from here on forward. But I think that, you know, with what you're doing and what we're trying to do in Lawrence, it puts us in a very interesting position because, you know, with all these other tribal powwows like Shakopee and then all these other ones, where do we move forward? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so, and I think that's kind of interesting. So I guess moving beyond that, how has your ability to be a dancer, to understand the competitive aspect, and then how has that refined your ability to execute, you know, from an event planner management perspective, you know, from the, it's like the player to the coach, the GM, you know what I mean, like kind of
Mhm.
that ladder that you take, and so because you've been around, you traveled, you've seen that firsthand what it takes, and so how has that been a, you know, been a deciding factor on your ability, you know, your decision making processes, your critical thinking, kind of going forward, and what can you tell about that?
Well, growing up when I was younger, I didn't really care to dance. I guess I didn't really I just didn't care for it.
The
But when I was, like, early teens, that's when I really started to, like, wanna powwow, and it wasn't so much like, "I wanna go and take first. I wanna go and take first." It was just like, "I wanna go and dance and have fun." Like, I wanna go jam out. Growing up, like, my Uncle John and Aunt Tukey, hearing them talk, and then, my mom and dad and other relatives, they would just talk about, like, how back in the day, just the vibes at the powwows, like, it would be jamming, everybody would be happy, just, there to have fun, and that's what I wanted to do. I was like, if I'm gonna contest and stuff, like, yeah, you're gonna either win or lose, but it's like, I wanna have fun no matter what.
yeah,
And so, like, when I do go to powwows, I usually make sure that I have money to get there and back home because I don't, like, plan on winning.
yeah,
I just go to have fun, and the majority of the time I try to go to powwows with, like, jamming jam groups, like Tribes, for example, for their 50th anniversary, or was it 50th? I think it was. They had all of their, past winter drum groups.
hmm,
Those were, like, the only ones that could come and sing, and so that was, like, really cool getting to hear Youngbird and, some of those older drum groups. But, putting that aside, I've also seen the ugly side of competition. And it's like when I tabulate and stuff, I want to do a good job. So if, you know, people come back and they're like, oh, you were cheating, or, so and so didn't come in grand entry, da 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 da. It's like, well, we have it right here. Like their numbers right here. They were in grand entry. And there are some things that we miss, but it's like we're just trying to do the best that we can. And there's just so many aspects to it. But I do enjoy tabulating, like being able to do a good job for the committee. And our system, we're able to have a layout of all the dancers that are registered. So it's kind of like, it's like first, second, third to like whatever place, but
Yeah.
it just shows like their standings. So if, like, for example, at Twin Buttes, somebody was upset about their all right, I don't think they placed or something, but they came up and they were pretty pissed, and they said so and so didn't come in grand entry and they took first. And it's like, well, we have the standings right here, so what do you want us to do? Like,
Yeah. Dang.
but
Some people are kind of bold too, huh? And that's just the competitive aspect of it.
yeah.
And I guess that's another topic, which is the competitiveness, the commercialization of sorts, the dancing for dollars, the statements
Hmm.
that, people are in it just for the money or this and that. Um, powwows have been here for quite some time. And, in Lawrence, Kansas, they had a competition in 1929, and it was a fancy dance competition with cash
Hmm.
prizes. And that makes you say, okay, well, we're almost to the 100-year mark on that. Give us, some 9 years and some change. But then there'll be 100 years of documented competition. And
Hmm.
so the competitive aspect and the commercial aspect have always been here. It's just an interesting that, with everything kind of unfolding, you're starting to see this new evolution and perception, I guess, of what it's going to look like from here on forward.
Hmm.
And so I think, personally, that powwows, you know, we still have a lot to accomplish. I mean, from the security aspect to the privacy, for the dancers, or the transparency, I guess, being open, having that deliberate process where you can sit down one-on-one and consultate and talk to people, the customer service component, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's just like someone being mad because a product doesn't work or a service isn't happening. And I think that from your perspective, from dealing with all sides, be it from the customer service to dancing at powwows to tabulating, um, I'm really excited, for your future, because I think that Indian country and powwows can definitely benefit from that perspective and experience. And and I was really excited for you this year, but like I said, things happen for a reason. And
Yeah.
so I guess now fast forward to now. It's about to be July. There are some powwows happening still that haven't canceled yet, and so it's going to be interesting. So what do you think, like from Red Earth to, there's a powwow happening in like Nebraska. Yeah, it's like at the end of July, and then I
Hmm.
know Ruben Littlehead's having his basketball tournament here in Lawrence that same
Oh.
weekend. And so it's going to be very interesting on what it looks like. Personally, I'm all for it. If we can do things, with the right and preventative measures, we can accomplish a lot. There are protocols that we can implement. There are basic safety guidelines we can implement. I mean, like, we talk about like this is a complex issue, but I mean, we go to Walmart, and we go to all these stores, we go to the grocery store, and there's people still there. There's people without masks either, and I mean, it's an interesting situation. And so I think that, I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm hopeful that these things happen. And like for us, we postponed our event until further notice,
Hmm.
because, I'd like to still have something, even if it's not October, but like December or November, because I feel like, why not, if things can be where we want them to be. And
Hmm.
so, before we kind of wrap this up, I kind of just want your perspective on that. What is, the the main thing that you personally are going to focus on moving forward, and how is that going to, hopefully benefit everything, especially from Denver to No Braid Creations, and then yeah, just kind of talk about that.
Well, I think right now we're gonna focus on safety, and we've kind of talked about it, and we just have to see where things go from here, like if it gets better or hopefully it doesn't get worse, so we don't have to go under quarantine lockdown again.
Yeah.
But we were talking about maybe a New Year's powwow, and there's also been talks about other places trying for a New Year's powwow, so that might be a goal maybe. But it just really depends. Like if you don't feel safe or you're not sure if you have elders at home or those that are at risk, I would just stay home until it's safe, or until I guess who declares a pandemic. I don't know how that works, but
Yeah.
that's probably the main focus. And then we do want to like work on our prize money. It's probably I don't know. We're gonna try our hardest for it to be the same, but it's gonna be hard to say. And I think that's gonna be the future for a lot of powwows. I think the days of 10,000 those kind of winnings. I think that's over for a little bit.
Yeah,
But
that's a very interesting. Sorry to interrupt. That's a very interesting
okay.
point you brought up. So, like a lot of these powwows, maybe especially these casino powwows.
Hmm.
I know, for instance, that Perry Band they had to cancel. They postponed their powwow, but they also closed their casino for a good minute, and then that also resulted in them having to, or the tribal members having to kind of sacrifice, not getting per cap for this one time. and uh
Hmm.
and I saw other casinos close down too, or then and a lot of them, these tribes in Oklahoma really trying to just rush in to open up, to get the process up and going again. And I think that's very interesting because um, when we look at that and seeing, from that perspective, okay, like here are these tribes, maybe these tribes which casinos were the biggest moneymaker. Like for us, we were hoping, to get something from the Prairie Band charitable contributions, but we didn't hear anything back, and rightfully so, because I mean when they closed, their casino, this
Hmm.
was, during the quarter that we applied to, and so it made, obvious sense on, we weren't going to be getting anything because there was no revenue to be made. And it makes you wonder, but there's so many communities that are just being impacted, whether it's financially, mentally, physically impacted with
Hmm.
with the cases like in the Navajo Nation. It really puts an interesting perspective on the economic footprint that's going to be, bestowed upon us now, because powwows, I mean, they generate a lot of money for the communities, anytime, any place, anywhere. That's what we say. Because for us, that little 1 day powwow we had last year in Lawrence, having it on a Wednesday, we generated an estimated 41,000 in economic impact. And that was from the numbers from the Convention and Visitor Bureau with the calculator that they have. And
Hmm.
so, can you kind of share what Denver March means, like, for the community, prior to COVID, and like I guess the investment that Denver March Powell has, and like how the city has recognized that too, with the partnership that you have, because that's a big entity to work with, the city of Denver.
Hmm.
There's so many standards, and you get permits, maybe, especially to rent out the Denver Coliseum, and having that expensive carpet too. Like that's the
Hmm.
thing. And so, can you kind of explain, the relationship process, and building that connection with the city, and also the economic impact that Denver had, if you have those numbers on top of your head, for the past couple years?
I don't think I have those numbers, but
Yeah,
because of last year with that woman causing a scene and that video went viral, and it was even in the UK, it was brought to the attention of the mayor and deputy mayor of Denver, and they reached out to us, and they basically we met with them twice, I think. Yeah, we met with the deputy mayor twice, and basically we just voiced our concerns, and they were very apologetic, and they wanted to help in any way that they could, because Denver March does it has a very big impact on Denver's economic, especially during that weekend. And then
yeah.
also the All West tournament. That's I think about 2 or 3 weeks after Denver March. So
Mhm.
we do have a big economic hit, or we help with the economic here in Denver, and that's what they wanted to keep a good relationship with. And so we were in contact with them a lot, and we are still in contact with them. But as of right now, they're dealing with so much other
Yeah,
stuff.
it's just crazy.
Yeah, they were fully on board with us helping in any way that they could, advertising or just getting the word out about Denver March. And it was really it felt good to have like that support from the city, and especially after that video. But at the same time, it was like we could have done a lot, I feel like. Or, Denver March could have maybe expanded into more workshops, or, you know, I don't know, the possibilities could have been endless. And we were really good going in economically, but as of right now, we're we're doing a lot of proposals for any grants and
Yeah,
so,
totally.
but
Well,
yeah, it's a lot of work.
that's interesting because for us, we've been doing a lot of extensive planning, kind of moving forward to being like, okay, well, throw 2020 out the window, scrap this year, let's
Yeah.
focus to the future. And so for us, we're really trying to look on how we can bounce back and help not only our priorities as Lead Horse and the Young Professionals Powwow, but helping KU Powwow, helping Haskell Powwow, and helping the
Mhm.
Lawrence High School Powwow. Because, just this past year, the city of Lawrence was slated to give $17,000 to 4 powwows in the city. And that was overall the entities receiving it. And that was such a, crazy instance because like it was almost as if like they finally like yes like they get it. And
Mhm.
but like since this kind of came into the fold with COVID, it's just like man like it just kind of sounded too good to be true to be almost. And so but the city of Lawrence, they've been working with us on our end. They've mentioned how since we just can't really know what's going to happen, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, we take it day by day. And so we're going to follow up back in August. Uh, we're going to follow up in August just to kind of, catch up on the same page, kind of understand where we're at. Because things can be very different from here until then. From a month out from
Mhm.
now, and that's whether if it's the city of Denver, the city of Lawrence, to Calumet, Oklahoma, which has a bunch of cows and houses and probably like 50 people. Um, it's gonna impact everybody, and I think that the best thing to do is, I guess, is just to brush up on research. What is everybody else doing? What are all
Mhm.
these other leagues doing? How are these leagues adapting? I was watching TV and I saw the American Cornhole League. They were going at it on ESPN, but they had their masks on, they were being socially distant, but they were still
Mhm.
doing it. And it's very interesting. And seeing, at the end of this month or next month, the NBA will start back up.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a whole interesting situation too, because what is that going to look like? We just got word that Florida has been rising and surging in cases. Texas has been surging in cases too, from all these health departments releasing information. And just recently, last week, Lawrence has kind of been surging in cases. We were supposed to have the governor released like 4-phase plan on getting
Mhm.
people back, like opening the economy up. We were in like phase one pretty well. Then went to phase two, and then I think we're either still there. Or, I don't know, but we're at the point where no more gatherings of 45 people or more. Like that's the cap.
Mhm.
And there are some bars opening, some restaurants, dine in. Uh, but just recently, I think it was like 2 days ago, maybe the Douglas County Health Department in Lawrence, they just pushed it back 2 weeks later. So 2 weeks from now, because it was supposed to end on the 22nd. But when
Oh.
they had that uptick, they extended it for 2 more weeks. And so
Mhm.
here we are, we're just sitting here like, dang, and the Hawk, the Jayhawk Cafe, the bar at KU, just recently, that was the outbreak that happened last week. And so like 3 people contracted coronavirus. And so just a hodgepodge mess,
Mhm.
and seeing Haskell turn into online classes, yeah, for its
Oh, that's
entirety.
crazy.
Like imagine if you were there, you know what I mean? Or you're a sophomore going to your junior year. It's very interesting too, because that's another industry that's going to be forever impacted. I can only think about the complex issues that these teachers face, coming into next year, not only for college, but them high school teachers, the middle school teachers, the elementary school.
Wow.
Like, what is that going to look like? Because kids, man, like kids like to play, kids like to be around, kids like to touch things, they like
Mhm.
to be messy, they like to be free. But like that's just, you know what I mean? It's just putting us in a weird situation. So as we wrap this up,
Yeah.
Larissa, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to kind of talk to me, and this was a really good
Mhm.
conversation. We talked about a lot of topics that probably have never been discussed, probably publicly like this. We all talk
Yeah.
about it, in our cars or on the phone or in our Snapchat groups or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, Larissa, before we end this, though, you are one of the featured artists for our shop, and I'd like
Mhm.
to also thank you for taking the time, and the opportunity to joining this cohort with Justice Wolf Leader. And so That's leadhorse.com/ or leadhorsellc.com/shop. You can check her out. No Braid Creations. Her stuff's been selling crazy on her site. No more lanyards. Someone got the snaggable earrings, so I was like, all right, I was about to buy those too. And then, but yeah. So thank you for taking the time, speaking with us. Thank you for letting me share your artwork and your creations. Uh, my sister, she bought the rainbow earrings, and so she really likes
Oh,
them.
cool. That's
And
good.
but yeah, so I was really excited. And take care. Tell Grace and Diane I said hi, and
Will do.
we'll stay in touch and kind of share things. Share some information, some inside secrets about powwows in the future. And
Have
so
to.
that's from me to you. Thanks
Mhm.
again. And do you have anything last words you want to say?
Just want to say thank you for asking me to come on the podcast. I haven't been able to dress up in a while, eh? And
Yeah,
then yeah, it was nice to talk about powwows and just kind of see where like your powwows at and like where we're at right now. But it's just weird times. Just have to get through them.
definitely.
Stay strong.
And one thing that I can also emphasize is the fact that while we are doing it, we're running these events, we're making these decisions, we're working with stakeholders in the community, from the local city government to prominent people in Indian country, you name it. A full circle, a collective community initiative that we're both doing in our respective communities. You're in Denver, and I'm in Lawrence. And I think that us doing that and also being the young professionals that we are is really setting a cool precedent for the future, because I really hope that more powwow people, powwow kids that are teens and juniors, want to look at this as a possible career path. Because I mean, this is the full thing. You know what I mean? From public speaking to writing, to you name it. You know what I mean? It's a sharp process to take. And so, um, thank you again for talking,
Mhm.
and have a good night and a good rest of the weekend, and stay safe.
Yeah, you too.
All right. See ya.
See ya.